was for all of you.
The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Thursday night. I hope everybody is having a great week. We're going to take on Jordan Peterson today. This is going to be fun. If you think other people should tune in, go over to Twitter and let the world know that we're going to be talking about Jordan Peterson today. Yeah, this will be a blast. All right, so we're talking about Jordan Peterson, Russia, Ukraine. What is the West, the role of religion? We probably need like 6 hours to actually do this, but we'll see how long it takes. I've got a pretty long video of Jordan's, and but we're gonna skip through it. Well, maybe not skip. I'm not skipping as much as I thought I was. So who knows how long this is gonna take? This could take a long time. It's not JP clickbait. We are doing Jordan Peterson, really. I promise. I'm not kidding you. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Two quick stories I want to talk about before we get to Jordan's view of Russia and Ukraine war, which we will talk about. Just we're going to do this very quickly. On the good news side, today, the Senate, by unanimous voice vote, temporarily suspended tariffs on imported baby formula until the end of the year to address the ongoing baby formula shortage. So you mean reducing tariffs temporarily? Okay. Of course, it's only temporary. So can we expect a shortage later? Temporary reduction of tariffs to bring in. You mean if you reduce the tariffs, more stuff will come in? That's good. Of course, that's not the real problem. The real problem is the FDA not allowing the stuff to be sold here. It's not its price. So the tariffs are a Band-Aid on the problem. By the way, in spite of Biden sending planes overseas to bring baby formula to the United States, there is still a massive baby formula shortage. Indeed, it's gotten worse. In spite of the fact that they opened the plant that they closed down that was making baby formula, it's still gotten worse. And have they done the things necessary to allow parents to just buy baby formula overseas and bring it to the United States? Tariffs are not? No. So there's still a massive shortage of baby formula in the United States. As Scott Lincecum writes, it's good that Congress has finally, after a mere 5 months of empty store shelves, decided to temporarily stop taxing foreign baby formula at a 25% rate. That's the tariff. But that it took so long, and that it's merely a temporary, partial Band-Aid that won't fix the systemic problems is not a good thing. Then he continues, reminder, these are the same people lamenting the fragility of the global supply chains and demanding that they be put in charge of monitoring, fixing them. It took them 2.5 months to realize we had a baby formula problem, and then another 2.5 months to provide even the slightest of systemic relief. So good for Scott Lincecum for pointing all this out. He's done amazing work on this baby formula stuff. He does amazing work anyway. You should read his stuff. He's excellent. But unbelievable, right? The hubris, the delusional of our senators and our Congress people, and just I can't imagine what parents are going through who cannot find baby formula, who cannot find baby formula maybe for their allergic child or whatever, but who cannot feed their babies. They must be frantic, and yet our politicians do nothing but stand in the way of us achieving this. talk about politicians. But now I know I'm going to offend half of you, but I'm going to offend you all night tonight. So, whoops, what happened there? I don't want that. Because, I'm not going to be friendly towards Jordan Peterson, but some of you are going to be very offended. But on a offensive note, I don't know if you saw this story, but the Congress, the House of Representatives, voted today on a bill that would codify access on a national basis, so override state law, to birth control. Now, all states, no state bans birth control or limits access to birth control because the Supreme Court has ruled that it is a right. Now, of course, Democrats are worried that the Supreme Court might challenge that, given that they overturn that, given that they overturned Roe versus Wade. So they are passing laws, just like they did with gay marriage, at the House level at least, not sure to pass in the Senate, to make it law that states cannot do this. We'll see if what the Supreme Court says about the constitutionality of these laws. But anyway, they put a vote today, a bill that would basically prevent states from banning access to contraception. Now, granted, this happened this afternoon, so I actually haven't looked at the bill. Maybe there's all kind of stuff in the bill. Who knows? But it's worth noting that only 8 Republicans voted for this. Only 8 Republicans. And I was looking on Twitter to see how they justify voting against this bill. And the only justification I could find is we don't need it. Because, God. So like 47 Republicans in the House voted for legalizing gay marriage nationwide. 47. And they're still trying to figure out if they can get 10 Republicans in the Senate to vote for it. But only 8 would vote to codify access to birth control. So I don't know. This is the Republican Party that you guys want to win. This is the Republican Party that you guys support. This is the Republican Party that you think is going to save the world. God help us. And since there is no God, he ain't helping us. So it's not needed. Yeah, a number of proposals around the country by Republicans in places like Louisiana and elsewhere. There are local politicians proposing bills that would restrict, limit birth control. And what's the problem of voting for it? Anyway, the theocracy is alive and well, my friends. The theocrats are winning. And talk about theocrats. Let's talk about Jordan Peterson. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I wanted that picture. So Jordan is taping these videos, and I think he does it with the Daily Wire. He has now joined the Daily Wire. He is now an employee, I guess, of the Daily Wire. This is Ben Shapiro's outfit. And he is putting out these videos. This is a video he put out the other day, what is it now, 10, 11 days ago, called Russia versus Ukraine or Civil War in the West. It is a fascinating video. I encourage anybody who's interested in Jordan Peterson, anybody who's interested in his ideas, I'd say his worldview, or interested in where conservatives are thinking and what the attitude of conservative is towards what the attitude of conservatives is towards Russia. This is a great video to listen to, but much more importantly, this is a video about, I think, that represents the fundamental challenge that we all face, right? Is what does opposition to the left justify? What kind of actions are justified in opposing the left? I mean, we can all agree, and I'll agree with Jordan, in terms of the existential risk that the left poses, in terms of the threat, in terms of the insanity of their philosophy and the ideology and the complete nuttiness of everything they believe in, and that it's anti-everything the West represents. But what is it okay to do in opposition to that? What is justified? Who should one align with? Who should one form coalitions with? So this is a video that really addresses a lot of that. And he does it through the lens of talking about the Ukraine-Russia war, which he sees as basically a war. And I'm putting words in his mouth. You're going to have to listen to it and decide if I'm misrepresenting. Basically, the war between Russia and Ukraine is a war between the right against the insane left, with Russia representing the right, representing the West, or representing the positive elements in the West. Even though Putin might not be a good guy, it's fundamentally representing the positive elements in the West. And that, to me, is a fascinating argument. Now, the other reason to listen to this video is, Jordan Peterson has always had a bit of a messianic kind of attitude. He was bringing of the truth. He was going to change your life. He was going to touch you. He was going to. But here he really does take on the persona of the angry prophet. I mean, he is biblical in this one. We'll get a little bit of it if we get through all the segments that I've marked to listen to. But you should listen to this because this is a biblical prophet. I mean, he gets to the point where he actually is predicting the kind of Armageddon that is going to befall the West if we don't sue for peace immediately with Russia. All the horror, all the devastation he articulates, just like a prophet in the Old Testament. I mean, this is Old Testament prophet, and it's just fascinating. And so again, I just find these things interesting. Maybe you guys don't, but I would watch it just for that. What does a modern day biblical prophet look like? He wears a three-piece suit, a gray tie, is super articulate, super articulate, and is scary as shit. This guy is scary, and he wants you to be scared. He wants to scare you. He wants to scare you. You should be scared of Russia. You should be scared of the left. You should be scared of your neighbor. You should be scared. This is war. So we're going to go over this. I can't go over the whole thing because it's, as you can see in the video, it's 51 minutes. And you know me, I tend to comment 5 minutes on every 5 seconds that I criticize. So we will go through some of it. I will try to do it justice. I will try to summarize some of the parts that we're not going through. Now, let me just thank Ragnar of the Desert. I really, really appreciate that. He started us off with a super chat with $100. I am going to say, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on super chat today. I'm not answering. I'll answer the questions. I'll get to them. We'll stay here as long as we need to answer all the questions. I will do that. But I'm not going to egg you on and encourage you to contribute. I'm going to try. Generally, I've got a number of people, particularly those who listen to the podcast, who've told me I do too much asking for money. So I'm going to try to tone it down a little bit. We'll see if I succeed. So I'm going to leave it basically up to you to ask the questions, to support the show, to use the super chat to do that. I will post. I don't see Catherine today, so I don't know if she got so discouraged by the fact that we didn't make our numbers last time that she gave up and left. But she's not here today. But I will post periodically where we are and how we're doing. Just a reminder. But I'm not gonna pound the table with please provide me with or please support the show. All right. So let's see. We're going to get going with this, but before, let me take you. That expression by Jordan Peterson, where he looks angry and intense. The whole video is like this. For 51 minutes, he is angry and intense, and he's got this look about, it's a little spooky. But again, we'll see him in a minute. I want to summarize what he says up to the point where we are going to start watching this, because I can't, again, we can't watch the whole thing, and I think the first 15 minutes, 16 minutes are not crucial to understanding of what he really wants to get at. So basically he's saying, we're trying to understand the war between Ukraine and Russia, and he says that Jordan Peterson has a thesis about this that is original, because he views the war between Russia and Ukraine as basically a civil war within the West. He views Russia as part of the West, Russia representing a certain attitude about the West, an attitude shared, by the way, by much of, he believes, Eastern Europe. And it is a civil war between that attitude and basically the rest of the West, led by America. And really dominated. For him, the other side of this is the left in the West. So he says, but first let's analyze the reasons for the war. And he basically gives 4 reasons, or 4 possible reasons. He doesn't really claim to support any one of them except the 4th one. But he gives 4 reasons for the war, and we're going to get into. We'll talk about. We won't talk about the first 3. We'll talk a lot about the 4th. Although I'll talk about some of the first 3. The first reason given for the war in Ukraine is, look, Putin is a monster. He's an authoritarian. He believes in Russian empire. He wants to take over Ukraine. He's a thug. He's just a bad, bad man with a bad, bad ideology. And he just, so he is the aggressor. And Jordan Peterson, by the way, starts off the presentation by saying that he thinks that this war is horrific, that he thinks Putin is awful for engaging in it. He thinks the Russian Orthodox Church is horrific for supporting it, which is important to Jordan in terms of the church. So explanation number 1 is kind of much of my explanation, right? Russia is motivated by fantasy, by empire, by megalomania of Putin, and that's why he went to war. And Peterson says, yeah, there's something to that. Then he says the second reason. The second reason is what you hear from a lot of people. The second reason is, look, Russia has a sphere of influence. Ukraine is part of that sphere of influence. It's kind of realpolitik. The West was trying to get Ukraine to join NATO. Russia doesn't want NATO on its border. It considers that, in a sense, an act of war. It is just trying to protect itself. It is just trying to protect its sphere of influence. In a sense, justified or not, this war is a war to preserve both the security and the identity of Russia. Now, I think once you get to the identity of Russia, that very much matches up to number 1, right? So that is the second reason why this war, potentially, why this was engaged. And this is the reason given by Merriweather, the University of Chicago professor that everybody on the right is citing. This is something that a lot of realpolitik people, realpolitik means very pragmatic, understanding power politics, predicted that Russia would do this because this is kind of what's in their kind of immediate, short-term power politics interests. Third, another one of Russia's interest. Russia completely relies on natural resources, on selling oil and gas. It is a dominant player in the world in terms of selling oil and gas. That dominance is being challenged. It's being challenged by Azerbaijanis and Uzbekistanis, and it's, according to Jordan Peterson, and it's challenged by pipelines that are going around Russia, and it's challenged by the Ukrainians. And by the way, the Ukrainians discovered that they have a lot of natural gas in Ukraine, which is true. And this is all about Russia trying to preserve its status and its influence as a dominant player in the energy markets, and it wants to It is worried about the West dominating and controlling and these natural resources and bypassing Russia itself. So it wants to assert itself. It wants to take Ukrainians' natural gas supplies, which all exist in that eastern region, and particularly in the south, near the Caspian Sea. And therefore, it launched a war really to assert itself with regard to natural resources. Now, let me just say, for those three explanations, there's a sense in which all three are right. Putin is a monster. He's an imperialist. From that perspective, he sees any growth of NATO as a threat to his authoritarianism, as a threat to his vision of a Russian empire. He sees Ukraine as key to Russian identity and a great Russian nation one day. If you read Dugin, there is this idea that Russia should dominate Eurasia and that it should establish basically an empire all the way to the Atlantic. Now, I don't know that Putin believes he can do that, but certainly Dugin, Russia's philosopher, we'll get to Dugin in a minute because Jordan Peterson mentions him, believes that Russia should be the dominant power, from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, covering Asia and then all the way over Europe. That Russia, indeed all of Europe, ultimately is in the the sphere of influence of Russia, or should be in the sphere of influence of Russia. And there's no question natural resources play a big role here. One of Putin's great failures as president of Russia is the fact that under his regime, all Russia has is natural resources. He has done almost nothing to diversify the economy of Russia, and not quite the contrary. He has suppressed other industries in favor of natural resources, in favor of just digging stuff out of the ground and shipping it. So these three explanations for the Ukraine-Russian war are all reasonable and all, I think, consistent with one another, and I think they all constitute a whole that puts the blame, I believe, squarely. I don't think Jordan Peterson ultimately believes this, but squarely in Putin's camp. And we'll get to the fact that Jordan Peterson completely evades and ignores the nature of the regime in Russia. And one of the things I want you to do, I know many of you have listened to my show, what was it, last show, 2 shows ago? I can't remember, 2 shows ago, I think, where I talked about national conservatives. I want you to see the connection between Jordan Peterson's interpretation of what is going on in the Ukraine-Russian war and the national conservative agenda. The national conservative agenda. Because one of the things the national conservatives emphasize is that they don't care about the nature of other regimes. They don't care if Russia is an oppressive regime. And neither does Jordan Peterson. So those are the three. But then Jordan comes up with the fourth, and this is the original. This is original. This is not one of the conventional reasons or explanations for the war. This is uniquely Jordan Peterson. Basically, Jordan says that the real cause for this war, and this is the one he gets most excited about, and this is the ones he spends most of the video about, and we'll get to that. The main reason for this war, and this is the sense in which this war is a civil war, is that the West is degenerate. The West is degenerate. And the West, here we mean Western Europe and the United States. It is a degenerate culture. And what Russia is really fighting, is to prevent the spread of degeneracy from the West onward. That Russia indeed is, according to Jordan Peterson here, kind of the bastion of civilization, that Russia here is protecting us from the degeneracy that the West has descended into. Now this is wow. This is wow. And this goes to the heart of the whole culture wars. This goes to the heart of how the right views the left, and how, and why I am not of the right. before we get before we get to that, I just noticed that Lex Friedman has just posted something. So it's Lex. So let me read it. Lex is actually watching from Ukraine. Thank you, Lex. That's quite a compliment that you would take time out, because I've noticed that Lex has been in Ukraine and been doing shows from Ukraine. I think I saw that, and he says, thanks for covering this topic. I'm chatting with Jordan when I'm back. If you have a question, topic, suggestion that you feel could be expanded on in Jordan's analysis, let me know. Certainly, I mean, I'd love him to elaborate on a lot of this. As I'm going to say, I am in deep fundamental disagreement with Jordan Peterson's entire approach to the Russian-Ukraine situation. I really worry about the state of our world if the alternatives now are national conservatism and Jordan Peterson and the left, because that's what I think we're left with, and that's certainly how Jordan Peterson presents it as, that he and Putin, in a sense, are in many respects the saviors of the West, and that part of that saving the West has to do with religion. So let's get to that. Let's get to this question. Thank you, Lex. Thank you for the support. Thank you, of course, for having me on the show. Thank you for doing everything that you do, because clearly your podcast is one of the most influential voices in, I think, the world today. Certainly in the world of ideas today. I think some of the most interesting, most important conversations are happening on the Lex Friedman show. Those of you not listening should. And I'm not just being nice to him because he's had me on, but because I truly do respect. And the fact that Lex is in Ukraine takes courage. It takes real courage to be in Ukraine right now. And it takes commitment to actually engaging with what is going on in the world. So kudos to Lex for not just sitting over here and talking about these things, but actually being on the ground. Being on the ground. All right, so I want to talk more about this idea of the West being degenerate and Russia fighting to prevent it from spread. So let's talk about this. And Jordan here really goes on off on this tangent about kind of the importance of Russian culture to Western civilization, and what it is, Russia's role within Western civilization, and the fact that it's important that Russia play a central role in reviving and defending and protecting Western civilization, which ultimately boils down to defending and protecting religion, our connection to God. And here I'm just going to play Jordan Peterson, because I don't think you need me to explain this or to cover this. Jordan is pretty good at explaining it. I'm sure I interrupt Jordan periodically as we go through this, but this is minute 1547 in the video, in Jordan's video, and we're gonna now watch quite a bit, and then we'll skip about 15 minutes forward, and then watch some more. All right, Troy, thank you. That is incredibly generous. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate the support. All right, so I want to play a segment here of Jordan Peterson. So this is him kind of on this fourth explanation. This is him on this idea of Russia's importance to the West. Russia's crucial, why did I put that on? Russia's crucial role in defending the West. You know, the fact that that the West in a sense needs Russia to defend it, that Russia is fighting for the side of the West, on the side of the West, or at least should be fighting on the side of the West. So this is into it, because I'm not going to cover that whole thing. It's as you know, Jordan, he covers a lot of material. So this is him talking about Dostoevsky. And Dostoevsky is important to what it is that is so crucial about Dostoevsky. So here it is. Let me know. If you can't hear this, if there are any problems, those of you on live, please let me know.
Yawa. Dostoevsky fervently believed in the necessity of a revival of Christianity in the more psychological sense central to the orthodox doctrine of theosis, the transformative process whose aim is individual likeness to or union with God. And he believed that the Russians would need to play a central role in that revival.
Now, no, Jordan Peterson here is describing Dostoevsky, but he clearly is sympathizing. We all know how much Jordan Peterson loves Dostoevsky, and justifiably so as a great author. But Jordan also, is very much affiliated with Dostoevsky philosophically. If you've listened to Jordan Peterson's talks in the past, you know this. And here in the section before this, he talks a lot about the fact that Dostoevsky, and to some extent Jordan Peterson, believe that without God, without religion, there is no morality. Indeed, that is a big point of much of what Dostoevsky writes, that without God, murder, immorality, there is no standard. There is no stopping. And this is a crucial perspective that Jordan has on Western civilization. Jordan believes this is part of what it means to have Western civilization and to be Western.
Everyone listening to or watching or reading this might be thinking, what could such arcane things possibly have to do with the practicalities of the current war? But that is an indication of our superficiality and ignorance here in the West, and not with the relevance of such things to the state of the world. When Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote The Gulag Archipelago, the book that shook the foundations of the Cold War era world, he suggested, like Dostoevsky, that it would be necessary for the Russians to return to the path of incremental organic development that had been manifesting itself prior to the revolutionary disruptions of the communist catastrophe. That meant a return to orthodox belief.
So Dostoevsky believed that the Russians inevitably had to return to God. That's what it meant to be part of civilization. That's what it meant to progress. Solzhenitsyn, who was the biggest critic of communism, biggest critic within the Soviet Union of communism, believed that the only way for a future for Russia was the embrace of religion. That's what a rejection of communism actually meant. Indeed, as we'll see, the only two options presented here are either religion or amoral, really immoral, atheism. Basically, it's either you're religious or you're Stalin. You're either religious or you're a communist. Those are the only two alternatives. And as you know from Jordan Peterson's debates with Sam Harris, even when he finds somebody who claims to be an atheist who is not immoral and not a monster, Jordan Peterson rationalizes that by saying, well, you really are religious, you just don't know it. Ooh, it's just complete BS. I think that's a technical term for it. So religion plays an important fundamental grounding principle of the West. And the enemy is a religion. The enemy, represented by the woke left, is the enemy to a large extent because of its rejection of religion. And because of its rejection of religion, the woke left is immediately associated with Stalin and communism. So there are only two alternatives in this world. Either we go on the path of religion, either we embrace religion as a fundamental grounding principle of the West, or we embrace the woke left. And in that choice, Jordan is clearly on the side of religion. And in a sense, Jordan is arguing, Putin is fighting that war for us. Putin represents that side of religion. Maybe he's doing it wrong, because as Jordan Peterson will say, this is an ideological battle. It's a battle of ideas. It shouldn't be a battle in the battlefield. But in the end, at the end of the day, that is what Putin is fighting for. He's fighting against secularism, communism, wokeism, which really are all kind of, he never says this, but all kind of the same thing.
There's every sign of a revival of Christianity in Russia, including a veritable storm of church building and cathedral construction.
All true, and Jordan views this as important. It's fundamental, right? Russia's having a renaissance.
Putin himself is, in principle, a practicing Christian.
Now, this is an important section. Listen to this. So Putin's a practicing Christian. This is important to Jordan Peterson. And he'll tell you in a minute why it's important. This is really crucial.
And it appears that he has been strongly influenced by such ideas. The degree to which Putin's worldview and actions are shaped by his professed Christianity is a topic subject to appropriate debate. But the same can be said about the views and actions of all who adopt or claim to adopt a faith. I certainly feel somewhat more comfortable knowing that Putin regards himself, however indeterminately, as subordinate to something beyond himself, as the alternative is dreadful to contemplate. That would be the absolute moral presumption of someone such as Stalin.
You notice that? Now that is powerful. That is truly powerful. He is happy that Putin is religious. He is happy that Putin is a Christian. He is happy that Putin views some authority above himself, because that is the only thing that will restrain Putin from being as evil as the atheist Stalin. Because if Putin didn't have a God above him, didn't believe in a God above him, oh my God, what could he do? There would be no limit to his evil. There would be no limit to his destruction. He just said that. I mean, that was a statement that really shook me when he said it. But I understand it. He really believes this. So Putin, being a Christian, believing in God, leads Jordan Peterson to think maybe he won't use nukes. Maybe he won't, commit genocidal murder like those atheists would. I mean, I don't know what kind of history Jordan Peterson reads or has read. I mean, he's a well-educated man. He knows his history. You should read sometimes some descriptions of the 30-year war between Catholics and Protestants. The destruction, the rape, the pillaging. More, as far as I can tell, more people died in the 30-year war in Europe on a per capita basis than did during World War I or World War II. And these were religious Catholics fighting religious Protestants who all believed there was a higher power. Or you should just look at Muslims, the Islamists. The Islamists who kill with no end in the name of their God. It makes them more bloodthirsty, not less. And how many Christians have killed in the name of their God? I mean, this is insane. To think that God places a restraint? Really? Where is this restraint? It's not in the Old Testament. So, I mean, this really gives you, it really gives you insight into the soul of Jordan and how important he believes, really, deeply, thoroughly, how important he believes religion is crucial to everything. In this sense, he is truly a kind of a Platonist. He is truly a Christian. It's not just an intellectual game for him. This is This is metaphysical, epistemological, ethical. This is his philosophy. I mean, Jordan and Israel cannot conceive of a non-religious metaphysics, epistemology, and certainly can't conceive of a non-religious morality. And I think most religious people who are intellectual can conceive of it. Their whole way of thinking is conceived within the structure of religion, and they can't imagine getting out of it. Or if they can, they evade it, because they have to evade it in order to sustain their faith. Keep going.
Regardless of the depth or genuineness of his belief, however, it is beyond dispute that the Russian leader frequently speaks of his country's role as a bulwark against the moral decadence of the West, and that he speaks in philosophical and theological terms to a degree unthinkable in a Western leader, all of whom tend towards a condescension in such matters.
So, wow. Putin is cool because he speaks in philosophical and theological terms. He has ideas and principles. We're not going to judge those ideas. We're not going to judge those principles. But the very notion that he thinks in those principles, that he thinks like he does, wow, that's impressive. Of course, Hitler spoke in those terms. Stalin, not in theological terms, but certainly in philosophical terms. Pol Pot was quite philosophical. Studied philosophy. Many within the Pol Pot regime studied philosophy. But this is, again, Jordan Peterson praising this, admiring this. Not judging it, notice. He doesn't judge Putin's regime. He doesn't judge what's going on in Russia. He doesn't judge how Putin treats his own people. It doesn't matter to him.
That has reached its apotheosis in Canada's Justin Trudeau, New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern, and US Vice President Kamala Harris. He also collaborates in his thinking with a genuine philosopher, Alexander Dugin. You can say or think what you want about Dugin as a philosopher, but the fact remains that such thinking has exercised a deep influence on Putin.
Again, yes, he has. Have you ever heard Dugin speak? You ever listened to what Dugin says? I'll do a show on Dugin. I've got some video that is just astounding of Dugin. Dugin but Dugin is nuts. Dugin is a fascist. Dugin is the worst kind of fascist. Dugin is genocidal. Dugin is the one who believes that Russia should be an empire from Pacific to Atlantic. Dugin has been egging on Putin to go to war with Ukraine since 2008 or before that. Dugin was furious at Putin for only taking one part of Georgia and not occupying Tbilisi and not then going to Ukraine. He was again furious with Putin. That was in 2008. He was furious with Putin in 2014 for only taking Crimea and only supporting the Donbas region a little bit and not taking the whole of Ukraine. And Dugin, I'm sure, is furious at Putin right now for not going all-out war and crushing Ukraine as quickly as possible, although I think they tried and they failed. It's astounding, that you would view a character like Dugin, you know, you can argue how good a philosopher he is or not. Really? I mean, this guy, I know Lex doesn't like it when I use these terms, but this guy is pure evil. Dugin is the anti-West. Dugin is everything that the West rejects. Dugin is a mystic. He's so mystical. He is part of the Orthodox Christian Church, but he's part of an ancient part of the Orthodox Christian Church before they did any reforms. Actually, the most mystical part of the that is also kind of pseudo-pagan, kind of it's this old church that is some kind of combination between pagan mysticism and Christianity. This is Putin's philosopher. No judgment. Jordan Peterson's not going to judge him. He's not going to say, Putin's nuts. He listens to this crazy philosopher. He listens to a guy who wants Russia to go to war with the West. He listens to a guy who hates the United States and would consider and has threatened nuclear war with the United States on several occasions. And all Peterson can say is, you know, he has a lot of influence with Putin, and he's philosophical, and he's theological, and he considers these things. And isn't that impressive as compared to these shallow Western leaders? I'll take a shallow Western leader any day over a nut job. Any day. I mean, it blows your mind. No moral judgment. Because the enemy, quote, the left, is so evil that, yeah, so he's a mystic. Yeah, so he's a crazy, you know, Christian Orthodox. Yeah, he's a fascist. Yeah, he wants to conquer Europe. You know, but the left, we got to watch the left. We got to go after the left. That's the real problem. I mean, this is the most dangerous ideas in the West today. From Putin to the National Conservatives to Jordan Peterson, these are the most dangerous ideas because they reject any semblance of what the West is really about and what the West really stands for. It rejects the idea, although Jordan Peterson gives it lip service, of individualism. It rejects the idea of reason. Again, Jordan Peterson gives reason, lots of lip service. But he wants it with his faith. He wants it with his traditions. He wants it with his crazy autocrats. All right.
And Russia. Putin regards the current West as decadent to the point of absolute untrustworthiness.
And Jordan Peterson agrees with him.
Particularly on the cultural and religious front. He is driven by economic and political necessity to trade with us and us with him.
Why is that? I mean, that's another thing that Jordan Peterson never talks about is how poor Russia is, how poor the Russian people are, how little wealth is created in Russia. Why so little wealth is created in Russia? Why are people in Russia so poor? Why is the Russian economy so bad? I mean, we'll get to it. Jordan Peterson has I've talked about this in the past, has a very, very weak understanding of economics. But it's more than that, right? There's something else going on here. It's a certain admiration.
So that Russia can be supplied by much needed hard Western currency, and Europe in particular with fossil fuel.
And Russia's not poor because of communism. The Czech Republic is richer than Russia. Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia are richer than Russia, and they have no natural resources on a per capita GDP basis. Russia's poor because it's autocratic. Russia's poor because it's authoritarian. Russia's poor because it does not allow markets to thrive. Russia's poor because it's run by thugs. It's run by mobsters. It's run by oligarchs, the oligarchs who got where they got, not because of the power of their reason and the power of their managerial capabilities, but because of their thuggery, because of their connections to Putin, because of their, excuse me, their connections to government. Russia's not poor because of communism. It's been out of communism for decades. Yet it has done little other than extract natural resources to grow and be successful.
But Putin constantly tells his people that he sees us falling far too far under the sway of ideas very similar to those that produced the revolutionary frenzy of the communist movement.
So you see, what really motivates Putin is he sees in the West woke left. He sees in the West the whole left as representing communism and Stalinism. This is on the rise. This is going to, and he's trying to protect the Russian people from these awful leftist ideas. This is why he's so anti-gay people in Russia, because God, he sees it in the United States. He sees gay marriage happening. And gay marriage is definitely going to lead to communism. There's no question about that. So we're going to go to war with Ukraine. We're going to flatten cities. We're going to kill thousands of people to keep gay marriage out of Russia, to keep those crazy leftists out of here. The left is coming, and they're going to take over. And remember, the left is Stalin.
And detailed so presciently by Dostoevsky in The Devils, and analyzed for their catastrophic consequence so carefully by Solzhenitsyn. And whether he believes this or not, and I believe he does, he is certainly able and willing to use the story of our degeneration to make his people wary of us and to convince them of the necessity of his leadership and to unite them in supporting his actions in Ukraine. And something akin to this can be said of the attraction that Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban
So let's now support all the authoritarians in Eastern Europe.
holds for the Hungarians and the Polish president for the Poles. Le Pen makes a similar appeal in France.
And Le Pen. All right, we're going to skip a little bit.
Are we degenerate in a profoundly threatening manner? I think the answer to that may well be yes. The idea that we are ensconced in a culture war has become a rhetorical commonplace.
So are we degenerate? Now, degenerate is an interesting word because degenerate has a history. I mean, the Nazis called the artists of the Weimar Republic, the Nazis called the culture of the Weimar Republic degenerate. The artists it was degenerate art. They actually the Nazis had exhibits of degenerate art to show the German people what they were fighting against. Degenerate is often a word used to describe the evil, corruption, subjectivity, immorality of the left. And isn't it interesting that the Nazis came to power primarily as a political party that was what? Anti the left. What defined the Nazis originally and what got people excited about the Nazi Party originally was that it was going to get rid of the degenerate left. Degeneracy was Weimar Germany. And Weimar Germany was indeed degenerate. But going after the left without thinking about what you're going with, attacking the left without thinking about what the alternative you're supporting is, leads one to the Nazis. It leads to the same place. Now, I'm not saying Jordan Peterson is a Nazi. He's obviously not. But he is evading the fact because he knows better. He knows the history. He knows the evils committed in the name of religion. He knows the evils committed in the name of degeneracy, of attacking, of freeing, of saving the world from degeneracy. He knows these things. And he's appealing to exactly the same thing. He's appealing to the same ideas, the same methodology, the same attitude as did the Nazis. This is All right. So we're going to skip ahead now. So now for the next, let's see, until 32 minutes. So for the next 12 minutes, Jordan Peterson will articulate the case that the West is degenerate. And he'll do that by describing the fact that Biden chose as a Supreme Court nominee a black woman, and that was the criteria. He will, define it as this degeneracy, as the woke, the irrational, the egalitarianism that is behind the wacky left. We're going to agree with everything he says in terms of how crazy that is. That's the challenge with the right. We're going to agree with them often on attacking the left. It's what they positively offer as an alternative that is scary. Yes, they see the evil that is leftist ideology. What they don't see is the evil of their own ideology, of their own alternative to that evil. So we're going to skip that. So he does a good job of defining and describing and condemning and showing how ridiculous the whole, radical left is, and the woke culture is, and the whole leftist ideology is. And we're going to skip ahead to kind of his view of how the Russians view us, again, in a sense, legitimizing Russia's view. Russia's there to save Western civilization. This is the civil war he's talking about. The real enemy, the real enemy is not Russia. Russia is our ally. He'll actually say at some point, we'll see if we get to that, he'll say we cannot defeat Russia, but more than that, we need Russia. We cannot be successful as a West without Russia. This goes back to his quotes from Dostoevsky and Solzhenitsyn about this revival of religion is going to depend on Russia. Yeah, to foster a better right, we need to dismantle the existing right. And we need to dismantle people like Jordan Peterson. So let's see him talking about the Russians thinking we're crazy.
And are not the Russians and the Hungarians and the Poles and the Indians, to a lesser degree, watching and thinking, those people have gone out of their minds. And we have to
speak for yourself.
Say it again. Clearly, the culture war in the West is real, and culture is losing. And Russia is part of the West. And the culture war is now truly part of why we have a war. And it's a real war.
And it's a real war where Russia's on his side. It's a real war where Russia represents the good, where Russia represents Christianity and hating the left.
And it is certainly the case that we do not, therefore, have all the moral high ground, for some part of the reasons that Mearsheimer details, and for these reasons of insanity.
Now, the fact that the left is insane, the fact that these things are going on, does that undermine the fact that we in the West are better than Russia from a moral perspective? We fire, our corporations, private corporations fire their journalists when they think they are politically incorrect, unjustifiably, horribly. Our government still does not assassinate our own journalists, as Russian government does. While the mainstream media is dominated by leftist voices, at least some of the mainstream media, our government is not shutting down the opposition, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, in the White House, we still have not gotten to the point where we shut down opposition media, as they do in Russia. We do not have laws yet in our country that criticizing the government is reason to go to jail. They do in Russia. We do not take yet in America. We do not poison our political adversaries. We do not send them to jail. We do not take our billionaires, and I know some of you would like this to happen, we do not yet take our billionaires and put them in jail because they don't follow our orders. Our government doesn't do that yet. Maybe it'll get there. And certainly if the left, the wacky left wins, they will do it. But they haven't won yet. Indeed, politically, one could argue they're losing. By the way, he's not wearing in his lapel the Russian flag. I'm pretty sure he's not wearing a Russian flag, so I don't think that's happening. We are not as bad as Russia. We're problematic. There are evil ideas amongst us. There are people behaving crazy ways. Suddenly, in Canada, freezing the truckers' bank accounts, pretty horrific. He didn't have them all shot. He didn't put them all in jail forever. Not yet. And not everybody's Trudeau. The entire West is not that. So yes, we can complain about trans. We can complain about woke. We can complain about people losing their jobs and being kicked off of Twitter and being all these things. But you would still rather live here than in Russia any day. You're still dramatically freer here than you are in Russia any day. But you see, if your standard is individual liberty, then America is still the place you want to be, in spite of all the nuts, in spite of all the crazy people, in spite of the insanity that's going around us. You still want to live here, or in Copenhagen, or in France, or in Germany, in spite of everything. If you care about individual liberty, this is where you want to live. And you are morally superior, because there's more individual liberty here than anywhere else in the world. And yes, Tessie, the UK as well. Tazy. But if your standard of morality is how many people go to church, how many churches are being built, how many people say the right things, how many people believe the right things, how many people are religious, or at least how many people embrace their religion publicly, or whether our leaders are, quote, philosophical or not. God help us from philosophical leaders, but that's a whole other topic. Then if your standard is collectivist, and if your assumption is that the left is going to win, that they've won the culture war. Why? Because gays can marry? Good that they won. Then you see a moral equivalency. You see a moral equivalency between the West, as represented by America, and Russia. We are no better than them. No better than them. Indeed, in some ways they are better. They're going to war for what they believe in. Good for them. Insanity. This is insanity. And this is, again, this is what we're fighting against on the right. And this is represented in that document of national conservatism that I read to you the other day. That is what is represented in that document. It is a negation of individualism, the negation of individual liberty, the negation of reason. It's an all-out attack on the Enlightenment. Even though Jordan Peterson claims to be an advocate of the Enlightenment, it is a direct frontal attack on the Enlightenment. And unless somebody stands up and defends the Enlightenment, we're dead. We're all under Putin's thumb. Who's going to stop him? Who's going to stand up to him? Now, there's a sense in which this is all consistent with everything Jordan Peterson has said in the past, but it's becoming more and more explicit. The collectivism, the blindness that the hatred of the left generates, and the admiration for religion and its necessity for civilization, it's all just becoming clearer as time goes on with Jordan Peterson, and applying it to events in the world like the Ukraine-Russia war just clarifies, just makes it more real. So, but there's nothing new in that sense.
In fact, how much of it we have at all is something rightly subject to the most serious debate.
How much moral high ground do we have at all? How much any morality do we have at all? Why? Because the left is crazy. We're illegitimate. The entire America, the entire West is illegitimate because the left is crazy.
And I'm saying this as someone who also takes the advice of someone like Frederick Kagan seriously. Thus, the Russians think in some combination of convenient for them and accuracy in relationship to us, on top of their imperialist ambitions and their nationalistic populism and the potential thuggery of their leader, all that taken into account, those Westerners are so out of their mind, possessed by the very ideas that destroyed us for a century, and didn't they, that we simply cannot trust them.
See? They're fighting our war.
Those Westerners are so out of their mind that a devastated but neutral Ukraine is preferable to a functional bordering state aligned with the US and Europe. Those Westerners are so out of their mind
This is
that
Jordan
will push the world to the brink of a
excusing
nuclear
them.
war and potentially beyond to keep them off our doorstep, because we've been there before.
Again, everything is communism. We've been there before. There's no alternative, right? Because we're secular, we must be communist ultimately.
And we're not going back. And that is exactly what Putin tells his people. And they believe it. And in
Well, that's another thing. Putin tells his people and they believe it. It doesn't explain tens of thousands of Russians among the more intellectual, among the more intelligent, among the more educated, who have left Russia, who have escaped Russia. The hundreds of thousands who would, if they had an alternative, if they had some way to go. I don't have such a low opinion of the Russian people as to think that all Russians or a dramatic majority of Russians just buy into everything that Putin tells them. I think it is still a minority. Well, it might be a majority that believe in Putin, but the people with the brains, indeed, it's been called a brain drain. A brain drain is happening right now in Russia because people see through Putin, because people realize that their own individual liberty is served much better in the West.
In some sense, therefore, it doesn't even matter if Putin believes it, although I believe he does, along with whatever else he might believe in relationship to personal ambition and self-aggrandizement and the willingness to aggress and the desirability of resurgent Russian empire. And so the Russians believe that they have a moral duty and that they have the highest moral duty to oppose the degenerate ideas, philosophy, theology of the West.
And we all oppose the crazy left. So aren't we on Putin's side? Now, he's not on Putin's side. He makes it very clear. He's opposed to Putin. He's opposed to the invasion and everything. But what is his solution? Well, let's skip ahead to his solution quickly, because it's getting late and, whoops, what happened here? 30, all right, we'll go there.
Part of the West to not offer to Ukraine any membership in NATO or the Saramat missile would be sufficient to destroy Britain.
So he's taking seriously
once and for all
the idea that the Russians are going to use nuclear weapons against the West.
Perhaps the declaration of Ukraine as a neutral state for a minimum period of 20 years. Perhaps a new election in Ukraine subject to ratification by joint Russian-Western observers. Perhaps a pledge on the part of the West to not offer to Ukraine any membership in NATO or the EU that is either not simultaneously offered to Russia or moving forward on terms.
Well, in other words, let's reward aggression. Let's reward somebody who launched a war. Let's reward Putin by negotiating with him. Indeed, he says the number one priority of every leader in the West is to negotiate a peace right now with Putin.
Acceptable to Russia. And if not any of these offerings,
then something else,
then I may
something.
be dreadfully naive for reasons I do not know about such matters, and therefore wrong in my specific
Talk about Chamberlain.
suggestions, then something else that will bring peace. And the sooner the better. The Russians are a nuclear power. The Russians have a sphere of influence. The Russians have already integrated into the world economy in a manner that cannot be compromised without devastating global consequences.
Now notice, now he gets into this maniacal prophet mode where he's going to tell us how the world is going to end. Almost.
And all protestations to the contrary. None of us give a damn about Ukraine.
Well, that's true. He certainly doesn't give a damn about Ukraine. I happen to give a damn about Ukraine. What about Ukraine? What about the freedom of individuals in Ukraine to choose their own fate? What about the freedom of the Ukrainian government to decide what is good for it? What about the Russians who should be living in a free country and who are not? What about the Russians who are in jail for opposing Putin? What about justice, Jordan Peterson? What about freedom, Jordan Peterson? What about individual autonomy, Jordan Peterson? What about individualism, Jordan Peterson? What about Enlightenment values? Why don't we care about Ukraine? I care about Ukraine. I care about people. I care about freedom-loving Russians. So who are we supposed to care about? The left. Oh, the victims of the left. That's all we must care about. That's all our focus must be. That's all we should focus on. No, I say.
And never have.
Never have cared about Ukrainians or Russians.
Remember the Holodomor?
I remember the Holodomor. I did a show on the Holodomor, and I recommended the movie, Mr. Jones. I care about justice. I care about injustice.
Know what it was?
I do.
Well, for the Russians, Ukraine is akin in some important sense to Russia itself, even more so than the Monroe Doctrine Western Hemisphere is the U.S. I'm not saying that Ukraine is part of Russia or that the Ukrainians agree with the Russians, but our current concern is very self-aggrandizing and unreliable. And this is particularly true given that we in the West that opposes Russia have very much to lose in this battle. We have not yet woken up fully to what that loss will look like.
So we're going to get to that in a second. But Stephen says, you're on against peace. Wow, you want thousands to die and suffer for your genocidal campaign against Russia. How about you go fight for Ukraine? How about you identify the fact that Russia attacked Ukraine? That Russia is the evil party here. Russia is the instigator of the deaths of thousands of people. And that appeasing evil everywhere and always only results in more thousands of deaths or millions of deaths. Appeasing evil, appeasing aggressors, appeasing people who initiate force, going to start wars, only leads to more wars, more violence, more aggression. So yes, I am against surrender. I am against appeasement. I am against groveling before evil, groveling before somebody who initiates force. If I had my way, Putin would have been assassinated for starting the war. Why should Russians suffer if you can get rid of Putin first? Maybe that would avoid nuclear attack. But what? The idea that Russia starts a war and that we should give them everything they want because, God, It's Russia. They're powerful. You see, but Jordan is more sophisticated. He says, no, Russia's actually on our side. Actually, they know who the enemy is. Stephen 13, have you ever been in a tank? Have you ever fought in a war? I was actually in a tank. I'm actually shot a tank. I've actually been in a war. So don't give me lectures about tanks. You should listen to my first show on Ukraine, where I analyzed the T-72 and why the Ukrainians were going to do a lot better against the Russians than anybody thought, because Russian military equipment was so pathetic. Nobody's going to lecture me, or very few people in the world are going to lecture me about tanks. I was in the tank corps. Were you, Stephen 13? I was in military intelligence during a war. Were you, Stephen 13? Right? Have you seen death in war? I know what it looks like. I've been there. I've lived through several wars. God. All right. You don't appease evil. You know, Chamberlain did that with Hitler. Nobody ever learns. You keep appeasing the evils. You keep appeasing evil people. What happens? You get more war, not less. Peace with Putin is not peace. It's just delay before his next aggression. If you realize what motivates him, you would never negotiate with him. Yes, I like war. As if anybody who's actually seen war likes war. I hate war. That's why you can't appease Putin. Because I hate war. All right, let's see. Yeah, there's a little bit more I wanted here. Yeah, this is his apocalyptic vision of what happens.
Allow me, therefore, to prognosticate, both pessimistically
Here's the prophet.
and worse, realistically. I believe that all of the following consequences are already inevitable.
Now notice, this is stunning to me, not because of anything philosophical, but Jordan Peterson now is going to go outside of his realm of expertise, completely outside of his realm of expertise. He's going to go to an area where he knows nothing about, and he's going to procrastinate about the future, which even when you're an expert, you should be very, very careful in doing. But he's going to make predictions, as a prophet does, about what is going to happen in the next few years in the world because of this war. And this is amazing to me.
First, skyrocketing energy prices. I firmly expect oil prices to hit $300 a barrel.
So you expect oil prices to hit $300 a barrel, triple their price today. Now, on what basis would you expect that? Where is this crystal ball? Where is the economist who supports this assertion? What would have to happen for oil prices to go to $300 a barrel? Well, right now they're at 100, bouncing around 100, sometimes 95, sometimes 105. What would have to happen for oil to go to $300 a barrel? Well, one, demand for oil would skyrocket. And supply would not be able to match demand, and therefore prices would go through the roof. Alternatively, demand wouldn't skyrocket. Demand would stay where it is right now. And supply would shrink dramatically. But why would supply shrink dramatically? Are the Saudis just going to stop pumping oil? Are the Russians? Russia is still selling oil. Russian oil is on the world markets. So how do you get to $300 a barrel? I mean, what this is ignoring completely is the fact that the global economy is slowing, that the United States is on the verge of a recession, that China is probably in a recession already. That demand for oil is going to go down, not up, as the world economy starts shrinking, not because of Russia, but because of the stupidity around COVID. So demand is going to go down. So even if supply goes down, prices might go up a little bit, but $300 a barrel? Where do you come up with these numbers? This is the kind of hysterical prophecy you get from somebody who's, I fear, lost it. Stephen, you have become a tool of Russian propaganda and nothing else. That is bizarre. Bizarre.
Or worse in the upcoming year or two. Perhaps I am wrong in such a
300 or worse in
prognostication.
a year or, next year or two.
But the Russians still have control.
I, by the way, will take that bet. Anybody want to bet me on $300 oil in the next year or two? I'll take that. Just tell me how much I need to put down where.
Of some very important taps, and will be hard-pressed not to employ that strategic advantage as their position in Ukraine and on the world stage deteriorates.
There's no scenario in which oil goes to $300 a barrel. It just doesn't happen. Just because of the dynamics of supply and demand. It just, if oil goes up to 150, demand will collapse. The world would go into a massive recession. Demand would collapse and prices would have to go down. There is no mechanism. There's no imaginable mechanism by which oil can go to $300. I mean, this is, the only thing I can think of is that some Russian is whispering this in his ear, that this is pure Russian propaganda. I'll give you 10 to 1 odds that it's not going to $300 a barrel. Where in the universe? I mean, Saudi Arabia would have to collapse.
As it inevitably must. These higher energy prices will, of course, hurt the world's poor and developing countries hardest.
Yeah, all right, let's stop there, because then he says, I mean, his next one is, we're going to have famine. 150 million people are going to starve. Again, I believe that is a Russian talking point. And what was the third? I forget what the third one was. Oh, mass migration. Because of the famine, we'll get mass migration. And finally, the only one that I think has any credence is Russia will use tactical nukes. But we're not going to condemn Russia for using tactical nukes, and we're not going to criticize them. It's all our fault, because we are fighting this war, and we will not give Russia what they want. We will not bend over in front of Putin and allow him to do whatever he wants with us. It's stunning. Let me just, one last comment, because if I say it, you won't believe that he actually said it. So I just want him to say it. All right, listen to this.
Given our current state of ideological paralysis, we cannot do without the Russians on our side here in the rest of the Western world.
What? We cannot do without the Russians on our side. Why? Why? Because Russia's building churches. Because Russia represents the true West. Because Russia is free from these crazy leftists. Russia has never been a part of the West. Russia is always been an antagonist to the Enlightenment, with the exception maybe of a little bit of Catherine the Great. It's an antagonist to the Enlightenment, an antagonist of the West. Russia fought the Nazis. Russia was communist when it fought the Nazis. Russia was as bad as the Nazis when it fought the Nazis. Russia wasn't on our side. It wasn't on the West side. Russia was the enemy. It just was convenient for us to use them to help us defeat another enemy. But Russia has been the enemy of the West for most of its history. Russia has no part in the West. It is a mystical, backward, unenlightened country. Now, I'm not saying every Russian, obviously, but most of the good Russians have left, and most of the good Russians are leaving now. But Russia was never part of the West. And it is not a part of the West today. And it is certainly not crucial to the West's survival, to the West's success. So, all right. I mean, you can watch the whole thing. I encourage you to. You know, I think it's as bad. The rest of it is as bad. This is the right. This is the intellectuals on the right. This is the rationalization for the Republican Party, the Tucker Carlsons, the national conservatives. Russia, by the way, I mean, one of the biggest myths that Putin and the Russians have been perpetrating is the idea that Russia saved the West from the Nazis. But Russia did not save the West from the Nazis. It is the West that saved Russia from the Nazis. Russia would not have succeeded as it did, as fast as it did, against the Nazis without Western help, without American support. Yeah, it probably would have fought the Nazis to stalemate. Maybe it would have even gained the upper hand ultimately. But after even more tens of millions had died, they would have never taken Eastern Europe without American support, without American materials, without America slowness on the Western Front because of promises Roosevelt made to Stalin. And remember that Russia was communist then. Russia has never been our friend. It has always been our enemy. It has been the enemy of the West, of Western civilization, of the principles of the West, of the ideas of the West. And the fact that Stalin is today revered in Russia. I think I told you I was in Red Square, and there's a mall next to Red Square, and in the mall there was a guy dressed up as Stalin. And people were rushing to get photos with him. Stalin is revered by many Russians. That tells you how barbaric, how anti-Western. And that's the thing. If the whole point here is to fight Stalin, if the whole point is never to get communism in the West again, if the whole idea is to fight the left represented by Stalin, then Russia is the last country in the world to do that. Russia's still enamored with Stalin, and therefore with the communism. So Jordan Peterson is completely confused here. It's Putin that admires the Soviet Union. It's Putin that admires communism under Stalin. Dugin founded a nationalist, communist political party in Russia. Dugin, Putin's philosopher. So the whole analysis of the conditions in the state of Russia is completely upside down. It's completely wrong. And again, Jordan Peterson knows history. And I assume he knows the admiration with which many Russians, including Putin, have towards Stalin and the Soviet Union. I mean, it's not that Stalin is afraid of the return of communism. Yeah, he thinks the West is wacky, but not because of communism. But you see, to Jordan Peterson, Stalin is the enemy because Stalin is an atheist. To Jordan Peterson, the left, the woke, the secular, all have to lead to evil and therefore communism and Stalin. I mean, what's stunning about this and what's scary about this and what's upsetting about this and why I spent all that time trying to wake you up with regard to Jordan Peterson is because that video is watched 1.5 million times. It'll probably be watched several million times by the time it's done. Millions of people are exposed to these ideas. Millions of people take these ideas seriously. And Jordan Peterson is considered a guru on the right. a major intellectual, a major thinker. I know many objectivists who love his work. But this is scary stuff, and it should be viewed as scary stuff. This is the enemy. And if you can't see that we have to fight a two-front war, yes, we have to fight the left. Yes, we have to fight the woke insanity. But not by giving up our freedoms, not by giving up on the Enlightenment, not by giving up on individualism and capitalism, not by giving up on liberty, not by adopting collectivism, which is what Jordan Peterson and the National Conservatives want us to. All right, let's take a look at questions, see if there are any on topic. All right, I'll just do this one from Richard because Richard says, I'm going to ask for money for Yaron. If you find Yaron's show adds value to your life, give Yaron the amount of money you paid for coffee this morning and smash that like button. Yes, and you can do that here with the Super Chat. You can do $2. You can do anything just to show support. Or you can go to, right now my website is down, so I can't accept contributions on the website, but you can go to Patreon and support the show there. You can go to Subscribestar and support the show there. So if you're not watching live and you can't use the Super Chat, those are the venues in which you can support the show. Thank you, Richard. Really appreciate that. Richard also asks, I think current trends in Russia and Eastern Europe as a whole are one of the most regrettable developments in recent times compared with the optimism of the 90s. Absolutely true. Even Poland, with figures like Balas, I can't pronounce the name, is backsliding. Yes, Poland is backsliding. What's interesting is Jordan Peterson mentions Poland as part of the anti-left on the side, in a sense, of Putin. And yet Poland is the most adamant of all the countries that we not negotiate with Putin, that we not compromise with Putin, that he must be defeated. Of all the countries, Poland is the most adamant about it. Because Poland knows the Russians. They know Putin. And even though if Putin uses technical nukes, Poland is going to get hit, they're willing to take that risk, because they know that Putin's aggression will not stop. So it's interesting that he lumps them all together, but Poland is so opposed right now to Putin, so opposed. And again, he doesn't mention that. He doesn't mention the fact that Poland's opposed to what Putin is doing, that nominally at least, so is Hungary, although not really, so is Orban, but Poland adamantly so. Hungary is part of the EU, so they support the sanctions against Russia. They supported all that because it has to be unanimous in the EU. But they also say they understand the Russians. They come of him or her. They try to have it both ways. Hungary does. But Poland is super aggressive against Russia. Paul says, in light of your discussion, how do you account for the many people, including some objectivists, who hold that the left is much greater threat than the religious right and won't denounce the religious right? Well, I mean, not willing to denounce the religious right, put aside who you think is the greater evil, because I don't want to get into that debate right now. But not being willing to denounce the religious right, I think, is an act of cowardice and an act in a sense of treason against rationality, against the values of objectivism. So you can say, I think the left is a bigger threat than the right, fine. As I've argued before, I'll disagree with you. But not to be willing to denounce the right and not to see the right as a threat at all, that's just evasive and evasion, and it's unthinking. And it's not objectivist. It's not objectivist. The religious right, Putin, look at Putin. There's the religious right. Did he invade a country? Is he killing thousands of people? Yes. That's damaging. You might want to denounce that. Now, you might want to say, I think the left's worse. Fine. We can have that conversation, but you can't say the left is worse without saying the right is bad and without being willing to condemn the right. Otherwise, you've lost all objectivity. All objectivity. Richard says, Russia used to have so much potential, so many engineers and scientists and smart people. Some of my closest friends are Russian immigrants. They should have allowed foreigners to buy state-owned assets to avoid corruption. Yeah, among other things. They should have allowed for a free market. If they'd allowed for a free market, Russia could have boomed. They privatized they were advised by a Harvard economics professor. When they privatized in the wrong way, in the wrong order. They privatized in a way that increased corruption. But broadly, they screwed up the transition out of communism. And they never adopted the right values, and they immediately coalesced around an authoritarian thug like Putin. So, but yes, I think what's happening in Russia and what's happened in Russia is, again, it's a brain drain. Some of the best people are leaving. So it's not like there are no scientists and engineers in Russia. They are. And many of them are leaving. And unfortunately, some can't leave because they can't find jobs. And immigration laws make it very difficult for Russians. Ukrainians are encouraged and embraced. I mean, if the West had balls, if the West was even a little bit good, then the West would say, if you're Russian and you want to leave Russia, you're welcome over here. You're welcome over here. Stevens 13 says, you should talk to Ron Paul. I have no intention to talk to Ron Paul. I thought Ron Paul was what should I call it? I thought Ron Paul was pathetic and ridiculous and wrong and evasive and anti-American. I thought that when did he run for president and was most popular? In 2012? I was anti-Ron Paul in 2012, and my antagonism to Ron Paul has only increased. It has not decreased. So, and I have no intention of talking to Ron Paul because I have nothing to gain from talking to Ron Paul. It'd just be a waste of my time. 2008, thanks, Paul. It was 2008 where I was, I think it was also 12. I also think he came back in 12. And both times I publicly rejected supporting him and was antagonistic to everything. So, yeah, Russia has a lot of these good people. Don't know how long they'll stay in Russia. Hopefully they can all leave. And if we had better immigration laws, they all would leave. So one solution to the problems in Russia is to open up our borders to Russians. Just open them up. Say, if you're Russian, you want to leave, you want to come to America, you get a green card. Come on over. We should, Europe has done that to Ukrainians. They should also do it for Russians. Jennifer says, is this perspective of Jordan's at all surprising? No, not really. Not really. It's not. Stephen says Ron Paul is right about Russia. No, he's not. He's wrong about Russia. He's wrong about Venezuela. He was wrong about the Middle East. He's wrong about Israel. He's wrong about Iran. I really don't know any topic with regard to foreign policy in which Ron Paul is right on. I'm willing to say that. Jordan Peterson's his perspective is not surprising. It's consistent with everything he said in the past. It's just, when it's actually said, it's surprising when you actually hear it put together the way it's put together. Immigration doesn't cause problems. Immigration solves problems. Immigration generally, but certainly immigration of an educated population like Russians wouldn't create problems. It would solve many problems. Sika 87 says, thank you, Ron, for fighting the good fight. Thank you, Sika, for supporting my ability to fight that fight. I couldn't do it without you guys. Jeffrey asked, does Peterson fit the profile of someone who could unite the country politically? I know he's Canadian or Russian, but there's a lot of young Americans who idealize him and will aspire to be more versions of him. No, I don't think he can unite the country politically. he can unite certain people, but no, he's not a uniter. It has to be something with a lot more and a different type of charisma, and who can pick and choose those elements on the left that he can adopt that will attract people from the left as well. Because to unite the country, you have to bring in elements from the left. So I don't think Peterson is our next dictator or authoritarian leader or big uniter under, some kind of authoritarian government. He doesn't have it in him. He's too intellectual, and he really does believe at some level. He really does believe at some level that he's pro-individualism and he's pro-reason. He's got too much of a little enlightenment figure standing in the back of his head, back somewhere, whispering in his ear, not to take it too far. And so I don't think he can ever be as bad as I think the uniter will ultimately be. Put it that way. All right, thank you, Jeffrey. Adam says, according to Dugin's disciple, Roland Bohr, Stalin became a born-again Christian and a disciple of Saint Matrona of Moscow when he saw the Nazis' invasion in 1941. Interesting. The first time I've heard that. It's quite possible, of course, but I have no way to verify that or know that. But it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me. Note that Jordan Peterson doesn't believe that. Jordan Peterson still pits Stalin as the essence of atheism, of atheist communism, and the enemy of all that's good. There's no point in talking to people who you fundamentally disagree with unless it's in public and you're attracting an audience. But if I sat down with Ron Paul, well, we disagree. I'm not going to convince him. He's not going to convince me. But if we did it in front of a big audience, then the audience would hear my point of view, and that's good. But I have no interest in these people. All right, let's see. We've got 3 $20 questions, and then we've got a few for $5, and we're done. So let's run through this. Michael asks, in having conversations with many people who oppose or fear high levels of income inequality, I notice many don't do so out of their own envy, but out of a belief that inequality creates instability and resentment in society. Yes, I mean, I think they've been programmed, they've been brainwashed, you could call it, to believe that inequality is bad. And again, this is altruism, right? They care, so they don't believe, they're not envious themselves, they don't believe it hurts them particularly, but they've been taught to care about everybody else and to sacrifice their interests for everybody else. So this is altruism. The whole debate about inequality ultimately boils down to altruism. Without altruism, nobody cares about inequality. Without altruism, what you're concerned about is your own ability to succeed, your own ability, whatever level you are at. You're not concerned about others. Altruism is what breeds in us this concern about other people and worry that something like inequality is causing somebody pain somewhere. Liam says, why do people develop inferiority complexes? Even successful people. Is this from growing up with narcissistic parents? There seems to be an interplay between psychology and philosophy. Does bad psychology come first? In a sense, bad psychology comes first because that is what a child has. He has a psychology. He comes to conclusions about things. He develops an attitude towards certain things. And it's not all conscious because he doesn't have the ability to make it conscious because he's still a child. But in a sense, it's also philosophy because the parents have a philosophy. And that's what dictates how they behave. Why do people have inferiority complexes? Because they come to conclusions about themselves at a young age that diminish themselves because they bought into original sin. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why people would have inferiority complexes that have to do with the conclusions they come about their place in the universe, their place in life, and their ability to be successful and to thrive. And if they come to the wrong conclusions, there will be consequences. And one of those consequences is feeling of inferiority. We should ask that question, come back to that question at some point when we have a psychologist on the show. Richard says, what are the traits to look for in a romantic partner beside honesty, integrity, and attractiveness? Oh, God. You want somebody that you enjoy talking to. You want somebody that you are in sync with in terms of your lifestyle or the way you live. You want somebody that shares at least some of your values, particularly the important ones. Those are the kind of things, but I think it's a mistake to try to seek a romantic relationship by having a list of the things, a checklist of the things that they have to qualify to. I'm not saying that's what you think, Richard, but that's the danger. What you want is to find a good person, a productive person, an honest person, somebody, as you said, who has integrity, that you enjoy being with, and that ultimately you find sexually attractive. But sexually attractiveness is not the beginning. It might be, but it doesn't have to be the beginning. Sexual attractiveness is something that can develop as you get to know somebody, as you like them, as you observe them, as you see them move, as you see them act, as you see them interact with the world. So attractiveness is not a feature in them. It's what you find attractive in them. And people you like become more attractive over time. And people you don't like become more ugly over time. So I know people who I thought, wow, she's beautiful. She's gorgeous. And then I got to know her, and she became the ugliest person I know because she was a bad human being. So attractiveness is kind of an outcome of all the other things. It's the end. Now, sometimes you're attracted to somebody early on, okay? But then you have to figure out what they're like, who they are. All right, Hopper Campbell says, ARI's goal is to change the culture in 50 years. The culture where? In the US or worldwide? Wherever. I don't think there's we have always had a strong prior that it would be in the United States. This is the land of the free. It has an amazing Declaration of Independence. It has a sense of life. It's where we're based. But it might not be in the US, so wherever. It'll start somewhere. Ultimately, it'll take over the world. But where exactly it starts, I don't know. Our job is to get the ideas out there and to promote it anywhere that there are people interested in it. And with technology today, geography matters a lot less than it used to. Unless you're a nationalist, and then you care all about geography. Geography is everything. Geography is destiny. All right, James asks, you can be happy without children, but can you be happy without romantic love? Not fully. You can be satisfied. You can be okay. But I think to be fully happy, to maximize your happiness, to be complete, I think romantic love is a feature of that. And if you don't have that in your life, something is missing. And there's always going to be something missing. James asks, Jordan Peterson always struck me as this neurotic mystic, completely disconnected from reality. Yes, not completely though. Yeah, but yes, I think that's right. Rational metaphysician. The Republicans want to make it far harder to migrate to the U.S. I have just become an American. It is already far harder than it should be. Yes, much, much harder. I'll do a show on immigration soon. I haven't done a show on immigration in a long time. And I'm a glutton for punishment, and I love when people unsubscribe. So if I do a show on immigration, I'm sure a lot of people unsubscribe to me. I'm kidding. But yes, immigration is way too difficult in the United States. It should be a lot easier to immigrate to the United States. Our doors should be, for the most part, open to immigrants. James says, Lex, have you run on with Jordan? That show alone could save Western civilization. I doubt any show could say Western civilization. I'm not sure that one would. But that would be fun to have Lex invite me on to do a session with Jordan. But I doubt that will ever happen. Jordan is such a big name. Why have me there, right? What is gained for the audience? And I don't think Jordan would agree to it. I mean, if Jordan wanted to have a conversation with me, he could have invited me onto his show. He has an interview show, and he has not invited me on yet. All right, Philip says, hi, Yaron. I love your show, and you inspired me to read The Fountainhead. Still working on it. This is my first stream and my first donation. Cheers, and God, Peterson is one depressing bloke. Yes, he is. Thank you, Philip. I'm so glad you're reading The Fountainhead. Finish it, and then you can start up on Atlas Shrugged. I'm so jealous of you because you get to experience those books for the first time. I will never experience those books again for the first time. But thank you, Philip. And then Stephen says, love the content as always. Thank you, Stephen. Stefan, not Stephen, Stefan. I really appreciate the support. All right, guys. This has been great. Just so you know, we raised through Super Chat $796. So maybe if I stay quiet, you guys give more money than if I ask for it. We'll see how that works out in the future. But a lot of that is because Troy came in with 500 Australian dollars. I don't know if we would have made $650 without Troy. So Troy, thank you again. You know, you're one of my largest supporters for the Iran Book Show, so thank you for doing that. James says, what do you think of a recession happening in the next year? I think there's at least a 75-80% probability that we'll be in a recession in the fourth quarter of this year, if not, early next year. But I think the probability is very high that we enter a recession soon. So thanks, James. That was a quick question. All right, so Troy got us to the 650. Next show is on Saturday. I do want to do a show on Dugan, so I'm trying to find some good video of him. I found one very long interview with him, so I'm hoping that'll give me kind of the. I found a quick interview the BBC did with him, which was stunning, and I'll show you parts of that. But I want to see something longer, where he actually gets to talk about his philosophy in a more neutral place, where he's not just playing to the audience. So I'm gonna do that. And what else did I want to do? Yeah, I'll see you all on Saturday and Sunday. I'm not sure exactly what time yet. I'll also say that if you want to support the show, right now the best way to do it is on Patreon, because my website is down. It's been hacked and it's down. We'll get it back up soon. Oh, thank you for all the people who have responded to my request for somebody to help with the website. So that is in process. We've got a number of people who've applied, so hopefully one of them will work out and we'll get it done. And yes, and I did get the email about Wikipedia, so hopefully we'll also start back on doing that. Really, there's an interview that Lawrence Summers does with Dugan. That would be fun. That must be super creepy. Super creepy. All right, I might look for that one as well. That sounds like something worth just doing for the fun of it. You know, this is how I have fun, right? Lawrence Summers, Southern, interviewing Dugan. I consider that ridiculously fun. All right. Thanks, everybody. I will see you all on Saturday. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. Give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. It really is a way to support everything I'm trying to do here. Thanks, guys.